Welcome to our 112th podcast. Today we're talking about using feedback loops to drive continuous improvement. What's one thing you can do to ensure your hard-earned change doesn't stagnate, but serves as a foundation for continuous improvement? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants to explore and challenge workplace issues and to build better ways of working. It's a blend of theory and practice, grounded in real-world experience, working with organizations of all sizes across a wide range of industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want fresh ideas about the workplace, or just enjoy listening to consultants talk candidly about how to make work more effective and more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and this is Ben Kleiman, a certified change management professional. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey, Rich. Hey, everyone.
I'm like talking like a auctioneer this morning.
We got places to go. We got things to do.
That's right.
We got continuous things to improve. Continuously.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, Ben. That's what we're talking about today. Continuous improvement. Kind of building off of some of the things we've talked about in the past, and especially our knowledge performance tree to some extent, right? But we're always there's always room for improvement.
Right. And I think we've talked a lot, especially in the last several episodes, about stakeholder engagement, and that really set the stage for why we're doing all of this work to get these people engaged, to get everyone on board and moving in the right direction, harmonized, happily moving forward, and really working very, very fluidly together. And you then deliver the change. And it's interesting to think about, okay, now we've delivered this change. We were recently talking about handoff back to the business, getting it instantiated within the business. What constitutes that? How's it supposed to work? Okay, it can't just sit. Oftentimes, it shouldn't just sit. You want it to have a life of its own, in the sense that you want it to continuously evolve and stay something that's fresh and meaningful, because life will still change. The business environment will still change. The people will still change. The processes, the technology, all of that will still change. So it can't just be a one and done. Rarely. I mean, I don't know. What have you seen? I feel like stuff is so fluid nowadays. Nothing is one and done.
Yeah. But nobody goes into a change to slide backwards, right? So,
you hope not. Yeah,
right. I mean, we're doing this specifically. I think this is even in the ACP standard, right? Is that we're doing this to create something new that is a better way of being and doing
right.
Delivering value, right?
Right. The whole goal is to add value to the organization.
Right.
However, the organization defines that in their vision statement. And so that's very important. And we talked last time about the role of project management and change management, both having different remits, but they're all both in service of that goal to add value, to fulfill that vision, enable that vision.
Sure.
Yeah. So once you reach that vision, there's always more.
Right. There's always more. And that vision, it's like, do you ever really achieve the vision in full, right? Because the idea is that the vision is supposed to continue to carry and continue to be that beacon that we follow to get, to derive more value for the organization, for its customers, for, all the stakeholders that are
right.
So it's not, like you said, it's not just from, we're doing this as a project, but then we need to operationalize it.
Right. Yeah. Operationalizing it is great, but then it shouldn't be the be all end all, in terms of, you want to have some kind of continuous improvement mechanism set up. And I realize that's not often the focus of the change team, the change initiative, the project initiative, that kind of thing. But the more you can set that up ahead of time and kind of get those metrics established, as part of the handover
Right.
to business, I think the better off you're going to be, because then you have some through line in terms of how you built this thing, built this change, built this initiative, built this project, saw it through. And then now what can you measure going forward that might give you some continuity there and give you some hook into what would be meaningful to continuously improve, as
Right.
opposed to just, tinkering with it to tinker with it. That
Sure.
probably is not a good idea.
Well, and you just hit on something there, Ben, that because we need to know what it is that we're looking to improve. And
Yep.
so one of the things that I've experienced several times in my career, right, is some stakeholders feel and sponsors feel that we don't really need to capture what's going on right now and baseline, and find out what these KPIs are now. We just need to focus on what that future state is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that baseline of performance that determines, did we improve or didn't we, right? So
Right.
we need to have some established measurement of, so we can measure the delta of where we're at now and what that future state looks like.
Yeah.
And did we actually accomplish those goals according to those
Yeah.
performance indicators?
And I get it. It's so easy to just say, okay, we've got a vision, let's just go. And without
Right.
having some understanding of where your culture is, what your people or processes or technology, what level they're performing at right now.
Right.
Like you said, you won't know if you're improving. You won't know if you're improving the right things. You won't know what you should be measuring to track if they're improving the right things. You won't know what goals are reasonable or realistic, or it's aspirational but still achievable. It's a shortcut that rarely pays dividends down the
Yeah,
road.
absolutely. Well, Ben, we're about at the time where we should take a quick break.
Okay.
When we come back, though, let's talk about how do we collect that feedback that we need for continuous improvement.
You just put the guitar closer to the amp and you get better feedback.
Oh, that's beautiful. Rock and
And we're
roll.
done. Thank you. Thank you, podcast listener.
We'll be right back.
Oh, hi. I'm Hermie, the HR hermit crab. So, if you've ever sat in a meeting thinking, are we all talking about the same thing? I have a book that might feel very familiar. In my third cartoon book, Trust Fall Pratfalls, you'll find a collection of short, funny workplace moments. The kind that make you laugh and then immediately think, yeah, we do that. We cover things like unclear priorities, communication that somehow creates more confusion, leaders who mean well but miss the mark, and employees trying to make sense of it all. It's basically a highlight reel of how the heck did this happen? But each story also contains evidence based, valuable information such as simple ways to communicate better, practical ways to support your team, and small changes that make work a little more, well, workable. You can finish each story in just a couple of minutes and actually use the lessons the next day. Plus, it's a cartoon book, so you can leave it on your desk and be the envy of all your cubicle mates. Check out Hermie the HR Hermit Crab Trust Fall Pratfalls, available now on Amazon. Visit www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com or www.harmoniousworkplaces.com/Hermie. Oh, and if you see your workplace in here, maybe don't read it out loud in the next staff meeting. Make change your friend. Bye.
And we're back. So Ben and I are talking about continuous improvement. We're talking about feedback. We just left talking about, establishing, those key performance indicators, KPIs, and
In a current state.
in the current state,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But so how do we get that feedback that we really need to be able to show that continuous improvement?
Right. There's the crux. There's the rub.
That's right.
There's a lot of work that I've seen done where, at least from a change management perspective, You'll
Hmm.
see organizations taking pulse surveys or quick surveys. They might have some sort of, many organizations have sort of a regular cadence of surveying employees across the board
Hmm.
of the sentiment. If you're doing a specific change, you might have a separate set of questions that gets surveyed at a different cadence specific to that initiative, specific to the people impacted by that initiative, stakeholders for that initiative, things like that. So there may be different levels of surveys. Those I feel like are great, but they're very much points in time. And
Hmm.
as you know, it's very hard to get consistently good answers on a survey, in part because people who answer are often either very motivated to answer in the positive or negative, or they're very prompted by something that happened very recently. So you get that recency effect, but you don't really get always a sense of where is this sitting in the grand scheme of things. And
Sure.
so you oftentimes miss sort of the juicy middle of survey responses that you might want.
Hmm.
They can also be biased in terms of the questions you're asking. Even if you say they're anonymous, people sometimes don't like to share in that format or that way. Sometimes people
Right.
just ignore it because they don't have the time or it's not a priority.
Sure.
That said, it's still better than nothing, and you can get some kind of feedback. Back in the day, you used to get water cooler feedback or hallway feedback. You'd see people in the
Hmm.
hall. That's harder now. It's harder to be
My
serendipitous about getting that online. You
right.
have to be a little more active. But I'm really curious kind of what you're seeing and maybe what you're feeling is the the cusp of a new way of doing that. I feel
Hmm.
like AI, there has to be ways to track sentiment by analyzing Teams messages or chat messages or um, emails
Hmm.
without being big brothery kind of um, sort of overreaching, in a
Yeah.
technical way. There's got to be some way to do that. But
Sure. Sure.
what are you seeing? What's working really well aside from
Well,
serving?
yeah, a couple of things that I've employed and my current state and what I've done in the past.
Yeah.
Using a survey, there's like a change readiness questionnaire. Starting with that, how prepared do you feel? And there's several different levels of that we
Okay.
can you know um, look at, right? So there's certain buckets, right, that we put their level of sentiment into, and then we do a pre-test basically, right, and then we measure that against either milestones or at least at the end of, or should say the end, but where we're in the new state when we're live. Maybe we do that if it's like a software implementation. We do that in the test environment before we move to live, and then when we're at live, do another pulse on that. So I found that those are helpful. But again, like you said, I mean, some people are reticent to uh, give that feedback, or they're going to either be like middle of the road, um, or they're going they want to show that they're fully engaged. So there's a lot of bias that can happen. Um,
Mhm.
but to your point about sentiment and uh, measuring that with some artificial intelligence. So uh, we have the ability to get transcripts and notes from Teams meetings, Zoom, Google, whatever it is.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I found that the uh, when you run an analysis on one meeting, it seems to be pretty. You can pull like using like Notebook LM, which is a Google product, where I think you get up to like 300 artifacts into a notebook, right? So uh, pulling in those conversations can sometimes yield, what that sentiment is and where people are. Of course, how reliable and valid that is, from an assessment standpoint, it's arguable, but it's still uh, it's still a good measure, I think.
Mhm.
as long as we're using our human filter and not just relying on the robot to tell us. Because that's one thing that we have to keep in mind too, is that uh, the artificial intelligence tends to want to assuage us, right? Tends to want to give us the answer that we want to have,
Right,
and not necessarily the concrete fact. Right.
right,
So
right.
we have to look at that.
No, that's a really good point in terms of running some sort of analysis across a series of meetings. Um, if there's some way that the notes are capturing different voices, um, if people are sort of have the safety to speak up or ask questions or ask hard questions or voice dissenting opinions or differing opinions, that can
Hmm.
be really valuable if those things are surfaced in the meeting and you can pick those nodes up over time. That can really help as you put it into some sort of meta analyzer
Yeah.
tool. But
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
the challenge there is that if you have organizational culture where people are not doing that, where either it's not safe to do that or it's just not the culture, where it's a very top down, my way, the highway kind of thing, you're
Sure.
not going to get that. The only sentiment is you're going to get is the leader talking and
Right. Right.
silence.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
that
Well,
can kind of
it,
confound your tool at that point.
sure. Sure. Well, that brings
Well, I
us
guess
to
that's a
another.
signal.
What's that?
I guess that's a signal too. If you have
Sure.
a 50-minute meeting and one person talks
Yeah.
and
Right.
no
And,
other
and
questions
everybody's off camera and all that
and
stuff.
everyone's off camera, that's a good signal. And if
That
you have that
is.
consistently over 3 months,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like,
Big, big yikes. Right. For sure. Um, but one of the other ways that we can measure, the effectiveness of our change and where we're going with that is leveraging our management team, right? And because we want to make sure that they are reinforcing the behavior, kind of going off of Kirkpatrick's training model, right? Where that behavior, we talk a lot about reinforcement through rewards and recognition, on the job training, coaching, those types of behaviors, right? Relying on and even empowering those managers to have um, and keep track of some of the KPIs that we need to know, right? Like has the production been better? Has the level of quality improved? Has
mhm,
has the sentiment changed? And getting a feel for that from the management team, the people who are boots on the ground and plugged into the people all the time is I think that's been very effective. It's also telling to see, because we know that Gallup's report, right, that the relationship with the manager is very important. The quality of that, but
yeah,
we also know that that is a huge part of why people disengage too. So we have to sort of
right,
set bias.
right. Would From a practical perspective, would you do something like a pulse survey across a wider group and then have a separate either survey or one-on-one check-in or sort of something with just the managers?
Sometimes what I have found effective is when you can bring managers into a peer group, where they can, and you structure it right,
Yeah.
but you
Okay.
use that as a way to collect feedback, and you can transcribe it and all that, right? But it's a separate way for them to feel like there's a social support from not only the person who's moderating it, right? Usually that the change manager or somebody of that ilk, right? Um, and giving them the ability to voice those concerns. I think kind of goes hand in hand with some of the small business uh, frameworks that are out there, like the entrepreneurial operating system that uses level 10 meetings to raise issues, and then you solve those issues by talking through those, and that giving
Mhm.
people the agency to come up with solutions, kind of as a mastermind. and then having tasks to perform to go out there and help this person through coaching, provide more training to this person, or in those hard decisions. This isn't working out, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things that come up. That's just one technique. And like you said, pulse surveys are very important for that tip.
Yeah,
How about you?
I like that.
What do you do?
It's so dependent on the organization and the way that they like to do things. In terms of gathering feedback, we've talked about surveys, we've talked about one-on-ones or small group kind of things. I like to just listen, and in the meetings I'm in, if I'm hearing something, I'll try to surface that. Often I work with a primary contact at a given client, and so I feel like most of the time that relationship is one where I can share feedback and say either this group is thinking or saying XYZ, or I'm hearing in this meeting that there's discomfort with, or there's excitement about, and it helps to sort of shape things in that way, without necessarily fingering someone or putting them on the spot if that's going to be
Mhm.
uncomfortable for that culture. So sort of having that uh, neutral-ish, outsider-ish perspective can really help, and
Yep.
just being very mindful of the culture there can help. In terms of sort of taking that feedback and doing a continuous improvement, the continuous improvement part is very much dependent on what you're trying to improve. And so that I feel like
Right.
is a little bit different from just sentiment gathering and um, just it's so dependent upon what metrics are we focused on, what often it's a process you're trying to improve, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Like you said,
Yeah.
at
It
the
says it
start,
doesn't
you
have to
don't
be
have any
very good.
baseline or any
Right.
metrics that you've agreed on or any metrics that you've sort of it can't just be something that you said, okay, we're going to improve our price point and then measure on that because so many people have to buy into that and there's got to have to be supply chain changes. I mean, it's just as one example. There's so many things that go into that.
Sure.
There
Sure.
has to be a lot of alignment around that and what's achievable goal, what's aspirational goal, how are people incentivized? If there's a bonus on the line, will they be motivated by that bonus or whatever it is? Those kinds of things are so nuanced and often vary depending upon what it is. But the key thing you said from the start, it's just you have to have something that you're measuring that you've all agreed on and that you
Mhm.
know where you are today and where you're trying to get to. Otherwise, how do you define continuous improvement?
Sure. Sure. And one of the other things I know we need to take a break here for a
Yeah.
second, but one of the other things that I've found that's helpful is when you have some kind of place where people can go to reference the vision and reference what we're trying to do, the why, and all of that, right? So like even have like an internal website like SharePoint or something like that, where
Mhm.
and and making sure that when you are having meetings, particularly about the change, that you are reiterating the vision pretty much every time, right? And
Core
this is why we're
values,
here,
all of
right?
that. Yeah.
And then you're really revisiting those KPIs early on and seeing where we're at while we're talking. That tends to elicit conversation, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. you
Yeah,
know,
but it's all
yeah,
important.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all important. Right? But let's do this, Ben. We need to take a quick break, and when we come back, boy, there's so much continuous improvement stuff we can be talking about, and
We're
I
gonna
know
need
we
a
won't have
very
time to do it
large
all.
bow to put on it.
Yeah, right. Abs. All right, we'll be right back.
Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how harmonious workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.
And we're back. So Ben, we've been talking this episode about feedback loops and continuous improvement. Again, somewhat evocative of the fifth pillar in our knowledge performance tree model, but really particularly about change process and how change processes and how do we keep the momentum going, right, and continue to make improvements so that we're adding more value. How do we put a bow on this, Ben?
Well,
for our audience,
we get a lot of ribbon.
right?
Can you maybe as a way to start to draw this to some sort of good stop pausing point? Because I don't think we're really going to be done with all of this. I feel like we've been talking about today really juicy topics in terms of feedback and what are good ways to gather feedback, but there's so much more to explore there. And then we've also been talking about continuous improvement, and that's a whole really juicy ball of wax too. So maybe there's a little bit more we could dig into in future episodes. But as far as today goes, maybe tee up a little bit more about, for people who aren't so steeped in it, the knowledge to performance tree and the fifth pillar you mentioned, and maybe use that as a framework to say, here's what we've been talking about today. Give some people some sort of mental model or anchor for that.
Certainly.
And show how these things feed into that.
Right. I'm on it.
If for those folks who haven't had an opportunity to read the December issue of TD Magazine, we had a really nice, juicy, keep saying juicy. Maybe I'm the mood for OJ, talking about trees, orange juice and things like that. Orange tree. We had a really nice article there that talked about this whole knowledge to performance tree and setting up this model or this concept of a tree as an analogy for all of the things that you need to do for organizational development, for change management, for that kind of thing. And I think in this case, we're talking about the feedback loops and the continuous improvement aspect of that, but that all fits into that whole structure.
Yep. So for anybody, like Ben said, if you ever read the article, you can get that article at td.org, right? And that's in the December issue. We also have a blog on that, so I'll make sure I include the link to that. So
on our website,
harmoniousworkplaces.com. Right, exactly. harmoniousworkplaces.com. And so the 5 pillars that we've talked about, we had a whole series earlier this year.
Yeah, we talked a bunch about it earlier this year, and I think we've had blogs that go in specific directions related to it.
Sure. And it is a systematic approach, right? Because we literally start with foundational inputs, vision and purpose, strategic objectives, systems and processes, and of course the organizational culture. So we then move that into the developmental drivers, right? So that's the formal and informal learning, strategic pairing of either functional units or individuals, right? There's a variety of different things that we put in there, training mentors and training the trainer type of things. And of course, establishing psychological safety, which we have more information on our website from Cheryl Volpe on that. Then there's the behavior enablers, which includes goal setting, contingency planning, aligning all of this to the organization's strategic or strategy, right? So that coming out of objectives, and then tracking them and adjusting, what changes are happening. Then we have our outcomes and performance, which, are we effective and efficient? What's our customer satisfaction? So, this is um, our employee engagement and also innovation advantage. So we've got the performance part, right? That's that basic systematic, right? We have the inputs, we are converting with the development drivers and the behavior enablers. We have the output of performance, and then we have our feedback, right? We have our surveys, audits, and other data that we are collecting. It's our communication channels, allowing for communication to swing back and forth, and not just pushing that out, but also allowing, eliciting feedback, and then taking an iterative approach to what's going on to be able to, within the constraints of what we've already put into place, right? Hopefully being embedded in the culture, that we're able to iterate within that framework to continue to improve. I said a lot there.
No, it's all good and very helpful. And I'm wondering if you have it to hand, just how does each part of the tree relate to each of those systems?
Oh yeah. I mean, so right. So
So
the foundational outputs are the roots, right?
Right.
The developmental driver is the trunk. This is what takes those inputs and puts it where it needs to be in the tree itself, right?
Right.
The branches are the behavior enablers, right? And because that's where everything is going to stem from.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the fruit, of course, which is the outcomes of performance. And then the feedback loop is all the good stuff, the soil and everything that the rain and the
That nurtures the
compost and
tree.
all that stuff that's nurturing the entire
Right.
system.
Right. So the whole idea here is that you have this ecosystem that's nurturing this tree,
Right.
that is your organization and the enablers and the performance. And that idea is that you always need to be fertilizing the soil, feeding the soil, watering the tree, that kind of thing.
Yep.
You need to have that, and ideally in a very good way, healthy way, nurturing that to
Absolutely.
get that good feedback, and that good continuous improvement then will come from that whole beneficial ecosystem.
And just like a tree, it starts small, right? It has to take root. It has to become part of literally organically become part of, how we do things in the organization, right?
Right.
And you may have bitter fruit that comes first, right?
Right.
But as we use feedback, right, we get juice. I'm going to use your
Your oranges.
yes, that's right. The praise that pays today is juicy.
Juicy. Yeah, I was on the fence, maybe either juicy or KPIs, key performance indicators, because you tossed around KPIs a whole bunch too.
There you go. Yeah.
So maybe this episode is brought to you by Juicy KPIs.
Juicy KPIs.
Hey, that's if this whole change management, organizational development thing goes sideways, we could start a company called Juicy KPIs.
Oh, I love it. Well, everybody will be wearing T-shirts with that.
Like really good,
I love
juicy,
it.
healthy fruit and
Makes my mouth water, Ben.
we're tasty and we get stuff done.
Right on. Perfect. I love it. All right. Well, we're at that time, folks. Thank you so much for visiting us today and listening in. Ben, what do you got?
No, I was just going to say, in terms of your lead-in today, the one thing that you can do to ensure all of these hard-earned changes don't stagnate, serve as a foundation for continuous improvement, keep building that healthy ecosystem, is to start small. And I would add, building on that, start thoughtfully.
Yeah.
You're not going to do this overnight. This is a long game. But if you do it thoughtfully and intentionally and keep nurturing it, it's going to bear really juicy fruit that hits those KPIs.
And that's what we want
Over time.
The juicier, the better.
The juiciest KPIs ever. Mouth-watering KPIs.
I love it. All right. Speaking of juice, until we meet again, Ben, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find all episodes, resources, and ways to connect with us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love your feedback. Please rate, review, share, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And don't forget to add Harmonious Workplaces to your favorites so you're notified when new episodes are released. Again, visit us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.